Welcome to the crash course for the SCP RPG 2nd edition. Before I get into the video, I want to say that I don't recommend memorizing all of these rules all at once. If you just introduce the idea of all the rules to yourself and build over time as you play, that's how I recommend doing it. So, the video will cover the core mechanics, character creation, and combat. So the first thing I want to talk about is the core mechanic of any TTRPG, which is the dice mechanics. The way the dice mechanics work in this game is you roll a certain amount of dice, you take the top two results from that dice pool, you add them together, and you add any skill bonuses to that dice roll, and that is your skill check. That is your combined result for the skill check, and the difficulty is set by the director. If you beat that number, you pass. If you get below it, you fail. Now, in most cases, you'll have access to something called exploding dice, which means that if you roll the maximum number on a singular die, you get to add another die to that dice pool. So if you have, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, you roll 3d6 for a specific skill check, and you roll a 6 on one of the die. Well, that means that you get to add another die to that dice pool. However, it goes up in a tier. It goes up in a level of die. So you would add a d8 to that dice pool. So instead of adding another d6, you would add a d8. So theoretically, you could roll even higher. Now, if you roll an 8 on that d8, would you then explode again? Yes. Actually, you do. You explode up into a d10, which explodes up into a d12, which explodes up into a d20, which therein you cannot explode any further, and you don't add any dice if you roll a 20 on a d20. You can explode on all of the dice that you roll. However, keep in mind that at the end of all of the dice that you roll, no matter how many you roll, you only take the top two numbers, you add them together, and that's what you add to your skill bonuses to get the skill check. So that's what the exploding dice do in the game. The next thing I'm going to talk about is automatic successes. So every skill check has a governing attribute. The governing attribute has an attribute rating, which is a number right next to the actual attribute. This is determined in character creation, which I'll talk about later. But the automatic success mechanic is a mechanic that lets you pass a skill check if the attribute rating plus your skill modifier, if that number is higher than the skill check set by the difficulty set by the director, you automatically succeed. Now keep in mind, you can use this in most scenarios, barring punishing rolls. So if your director is making you roll a punishing roll, you cannot automatically succeed or use this mechanic. The same thing applies. There's a special case. If you're rolling against another player for whatever reason, you cannot use an automatic success. You have to roll versus the player. If it's versus anything other than another PC at the table, you can use an automatic success as long as it's not a punishing roll. Now, at your DM's discretion, he can ask you to roll a punishing roll. And on top of not being able to automatically succeed, that also means your dice don't explode. So it's a way to disadvantage you very slightly without you automatically failing. The next dice mechanic I'm going to talk about is cooperation. So to cooperate with your PCs to get a group roll, what you will all do is when you're asked to roll a skill check, you will ask your director to roll a dual or triple or quadruple tech, however many players are cooperating. If your director says yes, you get to then all roll the skill. So you all roll the governing attribute roll. You take for every single person rolling, you take the single highest number from that dice pool, you add them all together, and then you take the combined skill of all of the participants and you add it to that combined dice pool roll. So if you have 3, if it's a triple tech roll, and each player rolls, you add the top highest roll from each player. Then you combine all of the skill ratings, the skill bonuses of all the players, add all of those up, and that's your group result. I'm going to talk about reverence and exertion next. These are resources you can expend to get statistical boosts in the game. Exertion is refreshed over rest, where reverence is absolute. You can keep the points and they carry over. exertion, you can expend points of exertion to do a few things. You can add a d12 to an attribute check. You can increase your speed, combat, or projectile rating, or you can use it to dodge an attack when you otherwise might not have been able to. You can also bargain with the director to do something you might not have been able to do, like forego a skill check and use it in a point of exertion, but it's entirely up to the director. Reverence is used for only re-rolling an entire skill check, and you are granted reverence points for doing stuff in the game. It is rewarded to you by the director. You don't start out with any, whereas you do start out with exertion, which refreshes over a rest. Keep in mind, if you are asked for a punishing skill check, you cannot use either of these, both exertion and reverence. The last thing I need to cover for dice mechanics is critical successes and failures. If you happen to roll double the required difficulty for the skill check, you critically succeed, and the director will tell you exactly how that benefits you. On the same coin, if you roll below half of the difficulty for the skill check, you critically fail, and also the director will tell you what happens then. The next thing I want to cover is how to read your attribute chart. So looking at this chart right here for dexterity, we see that there's dice that are scribbled in, and the dice that are scribbled in represent what you are able to roll. So if you are making a dexterity-based skill check, a skill that has dexterity as the governing attribute, what dice would you roll in this case? Well, each column actually represents a singular die, but the height of the column represents what the level of the die is. So in this case, the governing attribute of dexterity would be 2d10 and d6. So you would roll 3 dice for a governing attribute for dexterity, and you would add the skill for whatever your skill is, and that would be your roll. Now, you will have a attribute rating for your automatic successes, which will be, in this case, it would be however many dice are colored in, including the 2 that are given to you. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it would be 7. That is your attribute rating for dexterity. Very quickly, I'm going to cover an example skill check. For this character, they have a dexterity rating of 7 and the dodge skill of 4 with a multiplier of 2. Now, most skills will not have a multiplier. Most skills actually won't even have a modifier, but I want to cover them in case you do have them. So, this character is asked to do a dodge skill check. So they will roll, as I discussed, 2d10 plus a d6 in this case. So I'm going to roll that really quickly. And I ended up with a 6 on the d6, a 2 on a d10, and the 7 on the d10. So since my 6 explodes, I'm going to add a d8 to the dice pool. So I'm now rolling 4 dice in total. And I rolled a 6 on the d8. So I'm going to look at my dice pool here, and I'm going to pick the top 2, which is a 6 and a 7. I'm going to add them together, and that is a 13. So that would be my attribute check. Now I'm going to look at my skill for dodge, which is 4 with a multiplier of 2. So the multiplier applies to your modifier. It doesn't apply to the roll. So in this case, for this dodge check, I'm going to add 8. So 8 plus 13 is 21. So that would be my skill check value. That's what you tell the director that you got for the skill check. Okay, I'm going to go through the process of creating a character now using the fast character creation method. So there's 2 methods to create a character in this game. There's a custom method and a fast method. Since this is the condensed crash course, I'm going to use the fast method here. If you want to learn how to do the custom character creation method, I will probably make a video on that as well, but I'm going to go through the fast one right now. So first thing we do for fast character creation method is going to be at the top right in this corner right over here. And it asks me to fill in our dividers first. And these are all static. with a fast character creation method, all of these dividers right here, here, and here are going to be 2. And it says a base speed of 2, base HP of 8, and a health multiplier of 5. And I filled them out just right here in these 3 boxes. The exertion divider is right there. And it tells you to do a personnel class of C and a security level of 0-1. This is essentially your level of your status within the SCP Foundation. If you're doing, if you are a part of the SCP, if this character is a part of the SCP Foundation, this one is not going to, so I'm not going to fill that out. But you would either write D or C. The standard is C, and the security level is 1 by default. The next thing it asks us to do is to fill out the disruption class, which for fast character creation is going to be dark. So we have to fill in this bubble right here for dark. And that is pretty much the first step. The next thing we want to do is pick out a class, which will give us some stats to fill in on our sheet. I went ahead and picked the soldier class, and that is on page 42, and it allows me to fill in some skills. So those skills are awareness. All of these are +1. And the following get 2. It is athletics. 2, and then a multiplier. I get to add a multiplier to that. So there we go. So those are the skills for a soldier. There you get some other stuff from being a soldier too, mainly some items, which is on the second page. You get weapons and uniforms. So I'm going to fill out the uniform first. Now I'm going to put it in the B slot here, uniform style B, for reasons, because I'm actually going to use this or hopefully give it to somebody. So I'm going to fill this out here, combat uniform. And I get to fill in an everyday carry. Where is the everyday carry? Right here. Here's the everyday carry tables. I'm going to fill in just everything that it tells me to. Okay, now that I did that, I have just some small items to fill in, but I will do that just off camera here. Something I forgot to do was to indicate on my uniform the suspicion rating, which is a 4. Don't forget that. And you get a bonus, which is for this uniform, stealth, you get +2 while in foliage or grass. So I'm going to write that here. Okay, now that I did that, I'm going to move on to the next step in the process, which is to spend attribute tokens. Now, using the fast character creation method, it says to use 10 attribute tokens, and they can fill up the dice icons however I want. So I'm going to go ahead and think for a moment about how I want to do this, and I will fill in all of my attributes, and I will go over that. All right, so I went ahead and picked out my attributes here, and I spent my 10 attribute tokens in the following way. I picked 10 bubbles, 10 dice to essentially cross out to let me know that I selected those, and I didn't fill in any bumpers, any of those circles, just because I only have 10, so I didn't want to spend all that money. So, or all those tokens. So, totaling up here, all of my slashes should add up to 10. So I'm going to count here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So all of those combined to 10. So that's all of the attribute tokens that I get to spend, which means that I get a 2d8 for strength, a 2d8 for dexterity, 2d8 for perception, and you can figure out the rest. So that's what I picked for all of these. And now I'm going to fill in the attribute rating for each of these. So I just counted up all of the dice for each, and I counted the 2 that are already given to me, and I just filled out the rating for each of these. And I'm moving on to the next step. The next step is going to be calculating the speed, combat, and projectile substats. So for the speed calculation, it says find your dexterity rating, divide this number by 2, which is 2, and then add 2, which is 4. So my speed is going to be 4. For combat, it is going to be my strength rating, divide this number by 2, which is 2, and that's it. So strength is 2. I'm going to do the same for projectile. It is divide the number by 2, and that's it. So perception divided by 2 is 2, and that's my projectile. The next thing I get to do is figure out my exertion. Note that there's already one, you just get one exertion just because, and the rest of it you get to determine by your willpower divided by 2. So it is 3, but divided by 2 rounded up. So in this case it would be 2. So I get to add 2 more little things right here. So I have 3 exertion points in total that I get to spend. All right, next thing I get to do is maximum HP. And the way I determine that is I take the base HP and I multiply it by the health modifier, which 8 times 5, I believe, is 40, because 9 times 5 is 45, yeah. There we go. And something I forgot to do is to add the weapons here, and that's from my class. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quickly. All right, the last thing I think I have to do is reaction and stagger at the bottom of the page there. So it tells me that reaction is your dexterity rating plus your dodge skill. So dexterity is 4, dodge skill is 2, so that's going to be a reaction of 6. Stagger calculation is fate rating plus poise skill. So fate is 3, poise is 1, so that's going to be 4. And I think that is it. Now you can obviously get your age, your character name, and all of that, but other than that, that is pretty much it for character creation. Approaching the final section here, combat. So the first thing I'm going to go over in combat is the order of play, which I find really awesome, and I think it's really cool. The order of play can be determined in 2 ways. The director can call for an initiative roll, or he can just choose somebody to act first. When the director calls for an initiative roll, everybody will roll an intellect plus awareness check, and the player with the highest initiative roll chooses who goes first. So it's not that they get to go first, it's they choose who goes first. And that's very important. Keep that in mind. And if the director chooses somebody just to go first out of intuition, the rules kick into play where after you complete your turn, you choose who goes next, which I find really cool. That is something I've never played with before. Now, that mechanic is very important, which relates to how you defend. It is beneficial for you as a player to go later in the turn. Going first is not that beneficial. There's drawbacks and bonuses to going first. Going first, you get to You know the situation and how it is, and you can make your action then and there. However, at every point after your turn, you no longer are able to dodge an attack if it comes your way, so it's risky. Whereas if you anchor instead of go first, the situation might have changed over the course of the turn, but you are able to defend at least once during that turn up until you go. So there's risks and advantages. The next thing I want to talk about is the procedure to attack with a firearm or a melee weapon. I'm going to talk about a firearm first. You're going to roll a check, which is your perception plus your firearm skill. And whatever you get on that check, you will relay to the director, and he will tell you he or she will tell you if you hit or not. If you then hit, you then roll your damage, which is your base damage plus your modified X damage, whatever that may be. And to calculate your modified X damage, you take your projectile multiplier and multiply the amount of dice that you're rolling for X damage, and then you roll all of that together, and that's your damage. Very similar for melee attack procedure. You roll a strength plus combat, strength plus melee, and if you hit, it's the base damage plus the same thing, the X damage, but in this case, it is your combat rating that multiplies your X damage. Now, the defense procedure is a little bit, I already touched on it a little bit. It's related to your turn in combat. So if you have not taken your turn and somebody attacks your way, you can dodge, and you roll your dexterity plus your dodge, and that will be your defense score. However, if you have taken your turn, you cannot dodge unless you spend an exertion to do so. Now, there is some actions you can take during combat, which include dodging, attacking, etc., but they are classified into actions. We have standard actions, non-standard actions, extended actions, and free actions. So it's action economy. So there are 2 standard actions per turn, and you can choose the same action twice. So that is the action economy. You get 2 standard actions per turn, and free actions are free. So I'm going to move on to HP and damage and going negative. If you take damage and you go to 0, if you go below 0, you have to make a death save. So your character falls to the ground when you go below 0. You go into the crouch prone stance, and at the beginning of your next turn, you have to roll a fate plus resist death, and you have to equal the roll equal to or greater than twice the amount of negative HP you have, and that's the death save roll. If you succeed the death save, you go to 0 HP, and you are limited to just 1 action at each of your turn until you heal to 1. If you fail a death save, your character dies and your game is over. You can take 1 more combat action. That's your final act of the game, and that is read directly from the textbook or the rulebook. The final thing I want to cover is mutilations. Some situations can cause a character to become mutilated. And additionally, you can take a mutilation in order to reduce the incoming damage. So the director will usually tell you, hey, either you're going to take a mutilation or you can optionally take one instead. Mutilations are not great. They have a chance to outright kill your character. So it's permanent effects that affect your character. Generally not recommended, but in dire cases, you can. Now, if you have any damage reduction from your armor or anything, any damage that comes towards your way, before you subtract it through to your hit points, you apply your damage reduction. You subtract the damage reduction from the amount that you take. And it is always applied after all calculations. Like if you get double damage for some reason, it is applied after, not before. So it doesn't get that scaling factor. And I think that pretty much does it. There are some other combat actions I didn't cover, like aim or disarm. But that's, I don't want to go, this crash course. It's supposed to be condensed. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to. So thank you very much for watching. I'm thinking about making more videos on this system, specifically the advanced character creation method. So if you'd like to see more, stick around.
2, 3. Is this song? Are we on? Cut to the band!